Hey, I want to welcome everyone to The Big Picture with Chris Principe and myself, Grant McGall, CEO of Five Star BDM. Today we're going to have a lively conversation. This is something I've been waiting to hear about, waiting to really pick Chris's brain about. We're talking about digital currencies versus digital nations. And what exactly what are we talking about here? Because this is an intersection in today's economy that is taking place over more traditional borders or traditional types of banking and that type of thing. So, Chris, I'd like to get you introduced here and let's get deep into this discussion.
Well, great, Grant, and hello. How are you doing today? Because this is a hot topic. I'm Chris Principe, publisher of Financial IT, and I'm ready to get into it with you, Grant.
Well, hey, let's just jump right in. We were talking about, what, Grant, what do we want to talk about this week? We're talking about global platforms. What is this really looking like on a international scale? You have one side, you got digital currencies that are really moving forward. Then you have digital nations. So first, and I think we've defined some digital currencies over a lot of the different episodes on Big Picture, but digital nations is a little different. So first, can you give us your definition of what a digital nation is, and then how this type of tension is occurring on the world platform?
Yeah, well, Grant, first, the digital currencies, which are going to be private sector issued. So stable coins issued by fintechs or crypto firms. Any of the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and right on down the list into the thousands they are. And then we have the other side, which is digital nations, right? So these are sovereign states that have some framework where they're provided now legal definitions, licensing and oversight, taxation, AML, KYC, and in some cases, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, right? So these are the countries that are really, from my view, are embracing this whole digital currency and the different aspects of it.
So when you say digital nation, and we kind of carve this thing up, this is something beyond borders. We're not talking about U.S., Russia, China. We're talking about a digital entity that is a digital nation that's made up of other countries, more or less, but then they have their own currency operating, or currencies, like more than one, and that is kind of a block that's happening.
Well, look, in my view, when we talk about digital nations, right, I'm really talking about countries that have actually made crypto legal or as legal tender, right? So the very first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender back in September of 2021 was El Salvador, followed a few months later with the Central African Republic, right? So in those two countries, Bitcoin is recognized as the currency of the nation along with their local currency. So it's totally legal to do any kind of transaction, trade, otherwise, including paying the government taxes, registration fees, duties, whatever it is that you might owe, all in Bitcoin. Then we move to like the second stage, which are those countries that allow crypto as legal property and with a regulatory framework of some kind, right? And there's quite a list, and each one of them is a little bit different. But I'll just run down some of the countries in the list
Hmm.
that have made crypto legal. Let's make it simple, right? So
Yeah.
Japan, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, European Union using their markets in crypto assets regulations that came about just at the end of last year. Australia, Singapore, South Korea, Portugal, Malta, Antigua and Barbuda, sorry, Bhutan, and those are the ones that actually have a framework. The ones that we expect to, this one of the main ones we expect to see in the very near future is going to be China, because they've already been testing the yuan-backed stable coin that's actually issued by the government, and it's actually in certain areas of China being used to transact business right now, and it's anticipated that they will do a major rollout of that coming up. So you can see there's quite a mix of countries from both small and large countries, including a couple in our own region of the Caribbean.
I when I hear you talk and I see all these things turn, and I remember when some of these countries went ahead and made digital coin legal tender for the most part, and you were like, all right, what does that all mean? And we start seeing this, in the deregulated space. I always picture these young kind of Gen X type millennial people just kind of like making these types of currency status, and it was kind of a cool factor, kind of a trend. And but now it's getting very, very serious in how these types of currencies can be used. I'm sensing a power shift, and so my question here for you, and we talked about this even last week a little bit, stable coins and things like that, and now there what's happening within the central bank digital currency space. So the question is this: do you see digital currency shifting economic power away from traditional nation states, or are governments reclaiming control through things like the CBDC?
Well, Grant, I mean, excellent question, because that really gets to kind of more of the heart of the matter. It is really what is happening and what is happening going forward. And we've talked the last few weeks and had some quite lively discussions around stable coins, right? And it's interesting to note, and let's take a moment to talk about some of the differences between what is a CBDC, central
Mm-hmm.
bank digital currency, and what is a stable coin. Okay, and the primary difference right off the bat is that the CBDCs are issued from the central bank, and they're backed by the sovereign currency of that country, and fully regulated, state control, all those kind of things that go along with it. While stable coins are issued by private companies such as Tether or Circle or PayPal,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and they're pegged to a fiat or a crypto or a commodity or algorithmically maintained, right? And we talked about the four types of stable coins, I think it was last show or the show before, or maybe both, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So, and the regulation around there is got a variety of regulation and kind of loosely governed, right? So, and there the purposes really are to be commercial and to be fast, cheap transfers, and they're providing us with a lot of financial innovation right now.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of interesting. So that you can see clearly that there is some major differences between the two. And I would just add that people who are believers in the promise of cryptocurrencies, which is to be independent of any government, any oversight, any regulation, will of course prefer stable coins over CBDCs.
So now you open up another. We talked about a little bit about the power shift, right? Now let's talk about trust, because in the digital economy, I mean, trust, and especially when it first came out, it wasn't a whole great deal of trust, out there. Again, that a lot of people looked at the digital world, digital economy as more of a fad. They tied a lot of this to the technological revolution that was taking place within the blockchain community, within the what we call the metaverse type community, and the like, and to see how this was all going to really work out, in the digital realm. But now they're starting to see that this is a viable transport of currency. So the question becomes,
Right.
in the digital economy, who do not today, 2025, who do people trust more with their money? Governments, banks, or decentralized networks? And why does that matter?
Well, uh, really, some interesting points you bring up there. And I want to just go back to one word you said, because it's one we heard a lot of for a while and now really don't hear anything much about, which is the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to touch on it a second and just say that maybe in the future we should do a show centered on the metaverse. But I am digressing now into something that, you know, is interesting anyway. So why don't we look at first the CBDC's pros and cons versus stablecoins pros and cons, right? So the CBDCs, trustworthy, all right? They're issued by the central bank, they're backed by the government, right? They can reach any of the population in that local current in that local country, right? They're a monetary policy tool, and again, they provide that low risk, and because they're tied back to the central bank, it is traceable and controllable, which means that any illicit actions uh, can really be fought against, right? So very difficult for, say, things like money laundering, terrorist financing, and these kind of things,
Yep.
because there's the open traceability on the blockchain. Right now, stable coins, and we go to the other side, right? So fast and global, right? You can make a transaction instantly, 24/7, anywhere from one part of the world to the other, just as long as you have the two wallet addresses and people sending it over the internet, right? No need for bank accounts, right? So it's a low entry for people. So in other
Mhm.
words, when we talk about the unbanked, and personally, I'm a big believer in that. In the unbanked are lucky, and they should stay unbanked because they don't need banks.
Uh-huh.
All, yeah, all they need is a fast, easy, and cheap way to pay and to get paid. Sounds
True.
like stable
Yeah.
coins, right? Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So also stable coins, DeFi ready, and they have programmability, which means that you can introduce smart contracts to perform certain actions, right? The cons, CBDCs, the cons are a big one for a lot of people, is privacy concerns, because now the government can monitor and control your usage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Another concern is that it may limit innovation and make innovation slower to evolve, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the bigger concern, I think I would say beyond what we really consider, but geopolitical risk, right? So can a country, weaponize CBDCs in global conflicts or in sanctions or against one another? Who knows? I'm just throwing it out there, Grant.
No, I
Now,
think what you just said there, and I'm going to stop you just for a minute because this is important. I think because when we saw the Ukraine Russia conflict and we started seeing how they were both, kind of mobilizing their forces, not only militarily, but economically, and we started to see
yeah.
a huge use of digital currency. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And I think that that's an example that we could potentially see much more of in the future. Grant, before I go into the cons on stablecoins, why don't we take a quick break?
Oh yeah, this is a good time for that. So we'll take a break and we're going to come back. Thank you.
Case efficacy chain, also known as chain of efficacy, a digital chain. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Educate, efficiency, effectiveness, and evolve. So whether you are doing market research, studying, doing market analysis, or making a critical financial decision, get the latest breaking, developing market news in the cryptocurrency markets at www.efficacycoin.com. Efficacy Cryptocurrency News is powered by Case Capital Markets. Third Wall Street is a new emerging global capital markets formation and structured trifactor financial hub at the U.S. third border in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, in the Caribbean and Latin America. The new Third Wall Street is the home of the Alexander Hamilton Financial Center and named in honor of Alexander Hamilton, an American founding father, first U.S. Treasury Secretary, and architect of the U.S. financial system and modern America. Third Wall Street is located in a U.S. National Heritage Area, Opportunity Zone, and the boyhood home of Alexander Hamilton in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Island, connecting three financial hubs in the Americas by way of new innovative financial technology and markets: New York Wall Street South, Brickell Avenue, Miami, and Third Wall Street in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, and established the new Caribbean America's Single Economy Zone, developed by Case Capital Markets. Third Wall Street will transform financial markets, improving access to capital worldwide. Visit www.thirdwallstreet.com.
The difference between influence and legacy, it's the platform that carries your voice. You're not visible because you lack talent. You're visible because your brand doesn't speak. I've built 5-star BDM to change that. Most leaders have the expertise, but not the presence, the vision, but not the vehicle. Across 3 cities, one brand is helping leaders rise above the noise. Here in the heart of Omaha, strategy isn't left to chance. It's engineered with precision. In Omaha, we engineered your Zachner brand, AI-powered, data-driven, precise. TISA went from a local nonprofit to a national speaker in 90 days. We don't guess your brand strategy, we build it. On the shores of St. Croix, your brand takes on depth and meaning, shaped through curated retreats and legacy experiences. In St. Croix, strategy becomes soul. Our retreats don't just refine your message, they rediscover your mission. One founder rewrote his entire company story here. Funding followed 30 days later. This is where leaders remember who they were meant to be. In vibrant Miami, momentum meets amplification, transforming your voice into a movement. In Miami, your brand becomes a movement. Business development accelerators. Audience building. Joy came with an old website and an outdated company name, but she left with 5,000 followers and a waiting list. This is where you scale with soul. 3 cities, 1 mission. Your legacy ignited. It started with a thread. Let's pull it together. Stop blending and start leading. 5-star BDM, where legacy is engineered, embodied, and ignited. Visit 5starbdm.com and book your brand audit today.
All right, we are back. We're talking about digital currencies and digital nations, and we were just beginning our discussion around geopolitical impact. And the
Mm.
question, begs because you got players like U.S., China, the EU. They're all using digital currencies and as basically tools of geopolitical influence. I know the U.S. has been slow, but they're starting to catch up because of the loss of the dollar's dominance. In China's already rolled out the digital yen, part of the Belt and Road strategy. And Europe is already experimenting with digital euro. And all of them see digital money as a geopolitical tool, not just finance, but influence. I want to get it from you, Chris. How do you think this is going to roll out on the world stage?
Well, Grant, first, back up just a second because the US dollar is not losing its dominance. It's still 80% of all global trade. Okay.
Okay,
Even if it
okay.
loses 10%, it's only 72% of all global trade, right? So the dominance is built in. It's not going anywhere, right? That's there. Okay. So that was the first thing that we'll talk about.
I had to get
The
your blood
second,
pumping.
yeah, because that adds a bit of a trigger point for me there at times, right? And by the way, later in this show, I'm going to spin you a scenario that is going to rock your boat a little bit. I think. Okay, but we'll
Okay,
save that
okay.
for later. Tease there.
Yeah,
Okay, so when we start talking about this, we look at countries like China, India, and Russia, for instance, who likely favor the CBDC approach because it helps them maintain their sovereignty on their currency. It helps them control the capital flows. Okay, and why do they want to control capital flows? Well, really, like most countries, because if you let capital flow freely, it will flow into the U.S. dollar. Okay, and the U.S. will become even more dominant. So those are some of the things that are very important to most countries, but in particular, you can see why China, India, and Russia
yeah.
would be very high up on that list. The other thing that I didn't mention, and one huge benefit in a lot of ways of CBDCs, right, is for the government. It removes the reliance on physical currency, so
Mhm.
paper bills and metal coins, right? Which is a huge cost to the monetary system globally.
Mm.
And if
Okay.
you remove that, it removes not only the cost of those metals and uh, counterfeit proof papers that are involved and the printing and the minting, but one of the big costs in money that people don't realize is the movement of it. And I mean the physical movement. A pallet of US $100 bills is very heavy, right?
Hmm.
You know, I mean, if you start talking about coins, and coins have to go out to the banks, from the banks they go to the stores to make you change, and then the coins get collected back, and then they go back to the bank. All this movement is heavy weight that's just being moved around, and it has to be moved, Grant, securely,
Yeah.
which is costly, right? So the governments, I think worldwide, we all agree that if they could get rid of, or at least dramatically reduce this reliance on the physicality of money, it's a
Hmm.
huge savings for them. And again, it gives them better control because with the CBDC, they can monitor, see, and do what you do with your money.
This is all important because when you say that, I mean, that was a great point you just brought. I didn't even think about the physicality of money. Like now, I probably got coins laying all over my house because now what can you buy for a penny these days? I think they're even trying to decommissioning, the penny. So almost the dollar is becoming obsolete. It's like $5 and $10. But even the use of dollars themselves is more burdensome. I think about myself like, oh my God, I gotta go to an ATM and get cash because this particular transaction won't, I can't sell it, I can't tap, I can't, so we got very socialized to using digital currency, right? Now it's just a matter of, I'm a brand guy, right? What is the brand behind it? I'm used to that brand of that those George Washingtons on there, right? These dead presidents, as we call them. We're used to that brand. So you say a digital coin, or you like, let me say a Doge coin, like when you got Elon Musk on the coin, you're like, well, does that spend? Is that real money? So that starts to understand what is real money and what is not real money. So government-backed currency is still maybe preferred to a certain demographic, yet other currencies is like, no, this still spends, right? So you're in other nations. So when I think about Caribbean and other smaller nations, you even mentioned a lot of small nations that got on board with digital currencies even early. Do you think this could then level some of the playing field against some of the other economic giants?
Well, Grant, certainly it trends that direction, and for a lot of these smaller countries, this is a huge savings in being able to uh, reduce the reliance on the physical aspects of money, both paper and coins, as well as being able to smooth the friction in the system of being able to pay and not pay. I mean, just as you mentioned, if you go and, I don't know, buy a coffee at Starbucks, right? And you just tap, that's it. You tap and you go. But if you go there and you give them, I actually don't know the price of a coffee at Starbucks. I was going to say a $5 bill, but maybe you got to give them a $10 bill to
It's
buy a
gone
cup of
up. Yeah.
right? And then they got to count out the money for you, count out the change. And then, like you said, you have, I don't know, 10 or 15 pounds worth of coins sitting at home. Multiply that by how many homes we have in America and just think of the weight that's involved. It's multiples of tons, right? So all of this is, but there's also the aspect that you brought up, which is the brand of it, the identification of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is probably the root of the matter on why the euro went throughout Europe, but not to the UK, because the UK very nationalistic about the British pound, right? So they needed to see the Queen every day on their bills, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's very nationalistic. And we've talked about this in the Caribbean because I've always viewed it and said that, one of the issues that trading in the Caribbean runs into is that each island nation has its own currency and exchange rate. And that makes it a very difficult drag onto transactions, right? And a lot of that is more nationalistic than necessary, right? And moving to a stable coin or a CBDC, in this case, either one does remove the reliance on the physicality of money.
100%. And that's why I like in St. Croix, we're looking to test, have a test bed for a model where digital sovereignty drives real world economic growth. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We understand what people are used to, but then we also understand the roadblocks underneath the current. Like I said, how can you get quicker, faster transaction? It's all about ease of use and speed of transaction is really what we're talking about, right? Not so much the actual personification or the visual aspect of the currency of itself. It has to be taken into consideration because people want to use things that they're used to, right? I think that's so important because there's a lot what I call regulatory tensions that are out there. We just talked about tension between the pound and the EU, and then the Brexit. There's a lot of tension there, but the biggest clash is probably speed. Speed, and then you can't like, hey, and can I sacrifice speed and do things the old way? Like you can, but you won't get there in time, right? So all these things I think will be taken into consideration as we really look into what digital currencies are about, digital nations are about, the big why. And I think you alluded to that, Chris. Why would you do this? We already have money. Why do we need new money? Is that going to be any different? But when it comes down to use of it, how it transacts throughout a world economy, then you say, maybe this is a better way of doing it.
Well, Grant, I like your use of the word clash before, right? Earlier on, you said that where things clash. And yeah, there is that clash. But at the same time, that clash also produces the opposite effect, which is basically the grease that can speed transactions and speed the movement of money and speed the movement of goods and be able to get people to be able to move their money faster. And as we know in business, right, the faster you can turn your capital, the more profitable you should be. Doesn't always mean it, but you should be, right? And that's why in banking, when we look at companies, one of the things that are very important to us is the CCC, right? Cash conversion cycle. So how long does it take for a company to lay out money to buy the raw materials, manufacture their product, sell it in the market, and get paid for it back? That's the CCC, cash conversion cycle. So if, let's say, a week of that is taken up by the movement of the payment and the movement of the payment back, you've added a week to the cash conversion cycle. Unnecessarily, I believe.
Yes.
But Grant, I'm going to hit you with a break again, and then we're going to come back with more fun.
I love it. I love it. Let's have more fun.
Reimagine a world where the Caribbean is seamlessly connected, where our people, our cultures, and our economies move freely across the islands. This is Connect Caribbean, more than a ferry service. It's the heartbeat of a new era, an era where economic opportunities expand, where trade flows freely across our seas, and cultural exchange flourishes. We are linking businesses, empowering communities, and reigniting the hope for a truly integrated Caribbean. Together, we're shaping a brighter, more unified future for the Caribbean. Connect Caribbean, connecting our islands, our people, our future.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world. All in one place, rtv.network.
All right, we are back. We're back. I want to turn this conversation into something that truly is in your wheelhouse, because you hit on something I think is very important about the infrastructure of money transfer. We just talked about the movement of money and how these banks have to then, secure all this type of money, move it around. Even people like, holding on to physical cash is more burdensome, especially in a highly digital society that we truly live in now. So when we talk about infrastructure and technology from a financial IT perspective, in your opinion, what infrastructure will now be needed for a digital nation to thrive in blockchain, digital ID, cross-border payment rails? What do you think, Chris?
Well, Grant, a lot of that already exists. I mean, the blockchains are out there. The ability to produce a new blockchain is very technically viable and straightforward now. So in CBDCs, it's a matter of those countries, building their blockchain within the central bank system and being able to distribute that way. And most of them who are interested in CBDCs already have done that, already are testing. I mean, I actually worked as a subcontractor on a project, I think back in 2017 for the CAD coin, which is the Canadian the Canadian digital currency that would be issued by the Canadian Central Bank to the 5 major banks, and that's there. It's already been tested and ready, and I think they're just waiting for regulation, particularly in the U.S., to come to fruition, and we're pretty close to being there. I mean, there's been an amazing amount of regulation put forward in the U.S. and passed, and more that will soon be passed, that is in this whole space of cryptos, which covers both the CBDCs as well as the stable coins. But I think, Grant, what you're really asking me, I think what you really want to know is who will dominate, who will win. You're a guy that likes a winner, Grant. You're a brand guy. Brand guys like winners, right?
Gotta have a winner, exactly. No, what you bring up there, the winners and losers in this whole new world, it's gonna be I always call it musical chairs, because there's gonna be new winners, new losers. It happens every time, especially in cycles of business. If you really look at it, there's always new people at the top. The Fortune 500 changes a lot more than I think people realize. And when you have a major change in how money is transacted, remember I said even earlier, the language of business is finance. So you're changing the language of business. That changes a lot of different things. This is new opportunities for new players, and maybe bad opportunity, for people that maybe there's a lot of legacy systems. You talked about this in previous shows. If you're holding on to a lot of legacy, and I give you an example. I worked for a Fortune 500 company in the early 2000s. It was a spinoff from AT&T Lucent Technology called Avaya. Well, they made very large PBX systems. These were legacy systems. They were operating on the public system, a lot of analog, then some digital. But when it switched to voice over IP, which we're doing right now, right? Voice over IP, they still, even though they could start making the new technology, they still had to maintain that older legacy system, which was very, very costly, and it slowed them down. And other companies like Cisco Technologies, like, hey, we don't have that burden, we don't have that legacy, we're going to go ahead and develop it. So it shifted the players at the top. I see that happening even in this financial world. We talk about these banks and things like that. They hold on to a lot of traditional systems. Can they shift quick enough when these new financial currencies take shape?
Well, I mean, Grant, that's excellent point, because legacy systems are at the heart of every major bank everywhere in the world. I mean, we're talking technology that drives the bank that's rooted in the 80s and 90s. Okay?
Right.
Literally, right? And yeah, a lot of new stuff is built on top of it, but the risk of changing those what we call mission critical systems typically written in COBOL, you know, really, they're the ones that are the foundation, the building block inside every bank. And they're just not going to look to do that. And by the way, that extends to a lot of industry and it extends to a lot of governments. Now, when you talk about changing the language of finance, I would beg to differ. I would say that we're adding to the language of finance. We're enhancing the language of finance. We're taking the dictionary for finance and making it larger. It's edition 23, edition 24. We're updating and bringing more to that language rather than just a change. We're not throwing out one language and bringing in a new one.
Yeah. So this is interesting what you're talking about. You have to really follow the methodology, but be aware, winners and losers. We're gonna say it first in the big picture. I'm telling you right now, in the next probably 6 to 12 months, the financial winners and losers are going to become more clear over time. Like, who are these? And remember, we just had a fast track. You look at a company in Miami, you're probably very familiar with. They were the logo of the Miami Heat, FX, right? And then they got into a lot of trouble, but they were just riding this train on digital currency. And it was like, wow, it was really big. A lot of people got involved, but then a lot of people got hurt because it's so new and somewhat unregulated. And then, it ran into some problems. I'm going to say just, and I want people to understand this. And as I back up 25 years ago, when people started to transact digitally on the internet, e-commerce really wasn't a big mover until regulation got involved. And all of a sudden say, hey, you know what? My money is guaranteed. I can use my credit card on the internet. And if something goes awry, I can be, compensated for that. So they had to bring in some kind of regulation. And when they did that, it stabilized the internet as a trusted form of transaction. And I think the same thing is now happening in the cryptocurrency world, where it was kind of like a wild west, if you would say that. Now some lawmen are coming in, right, and then can truly regulate this space to a certain degree. But then people say it's not the same. It wasn't like it was. You're going to have early adopters like, I'm out. I mean, how do you see this now playing out over the next 2026, 27, 28, with all the new, the regulation coming in?
Well, Grant, it's like the old thing. You don't know what you don't know because you don't know it, right? So, just as we started on the internet, we were able to learn things and improve things as we went along. And of course, there are people with bad intentions who are also learning and also improving things. And it's that, arms race that goes on. The good guys figure out something, the bad guys figure out something new. The good guys stop it, the bad guys find, and this will happen in anything in the world. It'll happen as we've seen in technology. Now, just to touch on FX for a second. This was a real case of a company that grew very fast and very large without using good business practices, and was in the hands of one individual who, maybe didn't start out with bad intentions, but didn't do things good. And by the way, that individual is sitting now in a federal jail, right? That's what happens.
Yes.
Unfortunately, people got hurt. But, you can't start with regulation and then hope innovation will happen. You have to innovate first, and then regulation catches up. And I would be the first to say that regulation has been slower in being introduced into the crypto space than it should have been. And a lot of that was, we've had past administrations that weren't so friendly and maybe didn't quite understand the impact and these kind of things. But, when we talk about, the good guys and the bad guys, let's talk about who is going to dominate here, right?
Yeah.
And as we know from history, right? We know from history, the governments win. The king rules, right? And what the king says goes. So those CBDCs that are initiated by, any of the countries internally for themselves will be a currency of use in those countries, right? Because the government will just demand it, right? Whether it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. The government will demand it. But keep in mind that stable coins are already well established in the marketplace already. Mm-hmm. They have a big lead on CBDCs. The market cap is over $200 billion right now for stable coins, and that is going to jump. And in the last segment, I'm going to give you a little scenario about that.
Yeah.
So, Graham, I'll tell you, I'm doing all the breaks today. I'm kind of liking it. I don't want to mean to take your job, Grant.
You're not taking my job at all. I got a good seat.
but I'm gonna spin a little tale for you for our last segment that will have you thinking maybe a little differently, I hope.
I'm looking forward to that. Let's take a break.
Third Wall Street is a new emerging global capital markets formation and structured trifactor financial hub at the U.S. third border in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, in the Caribbean and Latin America. The new Third Wall Street is the home of the Alexander Hamilton Financial Center and named in honor of Alexander Hamilton, an American founding father, first U.S. Treasury Secretary, and architect of the U.S. financial system and modern America. Third Wall Street is located in a U.S. National Heritage Area, Opportunity Zone, and the boyhood home of Alexander Hamilton in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Island, connecting 3 financial hubs in the Americas by way of new innovative financial technology and markets: New York Wall Street South, Brickell Avenue, Miami, and Third Wall Street in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, and established the new Caribbean America's Single Economy Zone, developed by SETI Case Capital Markets. Third Wall Street will transform financial markets, improving access to capital worldwide. Visit www.thirdwallstreet.com.
In today's fast-paced financial landscape, access to capital is the key to success. At the heart of this revolution is Case Capital Markets, powered by SETI Case. Here, innovation and investment converge, creating a dynamic environment where businesses can thrive and reach new heights. Introducing Grant McGaw, the Senior Advisor at Case Capital Markets. Grant is a visionary leader, dedicated to connecting businesses with institutional capital and strategic funding. His expertise opens doors to game-changing investment opportunities, making him an invaluable partner for companies looking to scale and succeed in the competitive world of finance. With an impressive 25 years in technology, 9 years in healthcare, and 6 years in investment banking, Grant McGaw has a proven track record. He has successfully closed over $500 million in high-value transactions, seamlessly bridging technology, healthcare, and infrastructure with innovative financial solutions. His experience is a testament to his ability to drive success. Case Capital Markets offers businesses direct access to over 32,000 venture capital firms, private equity funds, family offices, and institutional investors. This network empowers mid-market companies with under $100 million in revenue to scale beyond their limits, unlocking unprecedented growth potential. Debt, equity, growth capital, public offerings. These are the building blocks of the future of capital access. Whether you're scaling a business, seeking investment, or exploring market expansion, Grant McGaw is your trusted partner. Together, you can unlock capital and create long-term financial success. The future belongs to those who take action. Are you ready to elevate your business?
All right, we are back, and I tell you, Chris, you got my curiosity up as you are a fantastic storyteller. We've been hearing your stories for a while, and these are not fictional tales; they are totally nonfiction. So, Chris, what do you have to say?
Well, Grant, first thing I want to do is I want to wrap up this competition that we started here, which is
Winners and losers.
CBDCs versus stable coins, right? So let's just wrap it up first, okay? So really, the stable coins are going to provide us with continued innovation, right? CBDCs will provide us with sovereignty and stability and legal clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are two very good things, right? And again, stable coins have a big head start in the market, which we'll see. And I would say right now that, in my view, stablecoin is leading. Okay, I'm not ready to proclaim the champ yet, but I would say stablecoins are leading the race. And realistically, what we might see, right? What we might see going forward is that you use the CBDCs within your country for government payments, for taxes, for your licensing, for any of these kind of things that you normally are paying the government today in the currency of the government, right? And you will see that stable coins will be the online shopping, the global trade, the movement of money within business. So we have government, we have business, and then the rest of crypto might very well be for investment, might very well be for decentralized finance, might very well be for things that people want to look to do some different things with. You know, they'll also play a role in some of these areas. So that's what. I don't know. I can't say who's the winner today, but now I got something that I really want you to grab hold of, because we actually started at the beginning of this episode
Yeah.
by you unintentionally saying that the US dollar is losing dominance.
Yes.
Right? And I intended to do this anyway, but you like foreshadowed exactly what I want to talk about right now.
See, I put on my wizard hat and I saw into your future and I said, Chris wants to bring this up.
Well, and as usual, Grant, you are on target. I mean, spot on. Okay. So follow me with this, right?
Okay.
Okay. So right now, the US dollar is about 80% of all global trade. In stable coins, right? The US dollar dominates in stable coins, right? It's a $200 billion market cap, and US dollar represents about 80% of that also. And that might be a coincidence, maybe not be, right? But here's how it works, right? Okay, let's take the biggest one, Tether, right? USDT, right?
Yeah.
USDT is Tether. And what Tether does is you go and you decide you want to buy some Tether, right? So whatever currency you use, you get a 1-to-1 to the US dollar for that currency. So Tether takes the currency, they will take it and convert it to US dollars, and then they buy US Treasury bills.
Mm-hmm.
Now, US Treasury bills, not bonds, they can buy bonds also, but US Treasury bills are short-term instruments that trade like cash, but also pay, and currently they're paying something around 4%. So while you're 1-to-1 in USDT to the currency, onto the Tether side, they're making 4% because they're turning that money right into US Treasury bills, right? And then what they do is they go to some of the other exchanges and they will say to the other exchanges, hey, listen, you know, if you have let people stake their USDT, and by staking means you take your USDT and you put it on hold and you can decide when you want to unstake it or stake it, but then you will get paid, and typically you might get paid 2% to stake it short term, right? And what Tether does is it gives the USDT to that exchange for the staking. Okay, so the Tether does is it then buys more treasury bills, so that again makes that 4%, even though it's giving up 2%, it's going back to making that 4% again, right? So, and this also happens with some of the other the number 2 stable coin, USDC, does pretty much the same thing, right? So what is happening now is, and I think it's in some ways unintentional, but intentional, is this money coming from all different sources is moving into U.S. Treasury bills, further strengthening the U.S. dollar grant. Okay? Now, let's think about globally. If we're in South America, or we're in Africa, or in parts of Asia, right? We don't trust our local currencies. We tend to do our business now more and more using a stable coin, USDT, USDC. So we're taking our local currency, converting it into US dollars, buying USDT. Once we buy the USDT, Tether is taking it and buying treasury bills. Right? Okay, that money represents about $12 trillion.
Nice.
Okay, then you look at the Eurozone, right? The Eurozone represents, outside of the US dollar control, it's the Eurozone, but it represents about $18 trillion. Just the Eurozone, right?
Right.
So the Eurozone now, you're going to have a portion of those people who are going to want to do business transactions or want to just move money out of the economy or the country, who will be converting to USDT, who Tether will take that USDT and then buy US Treasury bills, right? And you'll have a segment of a percentage of that market come out of euros and into US dollars. So if you look at all this, let's just say it's $30 trillion, right? And let's just say even 25% of that, 30% of that becomes moved into US dollars that is not in US dollars today, treasury bills in particular. The dominance of the US dollar multiplies. Okay? And what that does is it starts reducing even further the dominance of other currencies.
I just saw you sound like a banker right now that was just got a whole bunch of free money, right? I didn't have to do anything but set it up and it just transacts all on its own. So this is good news, right? To know that from an innovative standpoint and what's really starting to take shape, as you just talked about, this landscape, this financial landscape, and that the U.S., and I always call it about positioning. You go back to my branding day, we always talk about positioning. You have to be in position in order to then take advantage of the situation, right? That you become the clear choice within your market that you're looking to influence. You become the dominant player because you have the leverage. So what you just talked about there, which I was not completely aware of how all that would take shape, because if the world economy is utilizing all this as a platform, and underneath that is the U.S. Treasury, that's a win-win-win. I think and then it goes back to what we were saying earlier, which we only got a few seconds here. Why we're building this out in St. Croix, because now you've got that stable banking entity right there to then stabilize the Caribbean world, not only the Caribbean, South America, Central America, as a very clear option for others to do their banking with on a worldwide scale. So I want to thank you again for being with us.
Well, great. I just want to make it clear. I'm not looking to put forward any conspiracy theory here. The U.S. government may or may not be aware. I'm looking at, and rightly so, as a banker, and just looking at the numbers and looking at the movement, and coming to the conclusion that you could see is anywhere from $5 to $10 trillion over the next 5 years pumped into treasury bills.
Got it. And next week, we're going to talk more around this because this is interesting stuff. Thank you again for tuning in to The Big Picture.
Thanks, Grant.